right, we are on chapter 10, and it is our last chapter and the bow at the very end of a semester. So, I do recognize that normally this particular chapter I will do in person, where you have a debate partner and you stand in front of class and you actually utilize all these skills for us. And that's kind of usually how it goes. But being online, let's be honest, if you're taking an online class, you might be like me, where I have to take an online asynchronous class because it's a lot easier for me to do homework at, 10 or 11 o'clock at night while I have to work during the day, or however the schedule might be for you. I recognize that. And that's why for the debate, I don't have you have to have a partner or, present in a certain way, because it's really hard to get together sometimes with the same schedule as someone else who's taking an online class and for it to work well. So I recognize that, and we work with what we've got. And that being the case, I'm going to get into the lecture and we're going to go a little bit further into the notes, and you're going to see in some of these notes, you might have noticed where I have an activity where you're practicing concessions and refutations. In other words, you're going to be refutations. Sorry, tongue tie. It always happens with me. Anyway, you're going to see that the activity that I would have had you do in class is in here. Go ahead and take a look at that and give yourself a chance to, maybe imagine what that might be like. Maybe you have someone in class who you might know. I don't know. Or maybe someone you became friends with during class. Maybe you can reach out to them and see if they'd be willing to do a little bit of a practice with you. So again, I apologize that I can't do more in the situation that we are in, but that's okay. We're going to get through it because that's what we do. Okay, so here we are going to be talking about persuasive speaking. And again, we won't be in person doing this, but I'm giving you all the tools for times in which you might. And again, you can practice at home. And sometimes you feel a little bit more comfortable practicing at home, maybe in front of a mirror, maybe in front of a camera, maybe in front of a roommate or a friend or a partner, or your cat. That's usually what I would do. But at least it's giving you an opportunity to kind of develop some of that critical thinking skills when it comes to persuasive speaking. All right, so why is it important to have persuasive speaking skills for a critical thinker? And I'm going to give you all the little lists here. So you have an opportunity to speak about your views often, and sometimes unexpectedly. You might be having a conversation with something and they ask you a question and you're like, how do I express my view on my values on this issue eloquently? That obviously takes practice, but you've been practicing. You've been recognizing fallacies. You've been recognizing certain terms that you're like, oh, they're using jargon, or that's a particular fallacy that I recognize, and maybe you can kind of counteract that. Again, when we talk about persuasive speaking, it's not an aggressive, angry, that's not the goal here. The goal here is to eloquently explain yourself using the experience you've had in this class. So when we get into those opportunities to speak our view on an issue, it helps again when you're very well understood, like when you really understand the fallacies, when you start to really understand the way in which people will manipulate language. It really helps you to, again, counteract that, be able to show your opposing view, again, in an eloquent way, and in a way in which it's not that fallacious ad hominem where you're just yelling at, about the person's character, but you're actually coming to them with a very good opposing view on an issue based on reason. See what I've been doing all semester? All right. I hope this is helping. All right. Have you ever said nothing because you were afraid or unsure of what to say? Absolutely. Sometimes we get into that freeze, either fight or freeze. I'm a freezer. I'm just like, oh God. Sometimes. But if I have it, my values that I've been, I hold on to, and I'm researched on certain topics, and I really understand all the nuances of the conversation of what's happening, I feel like I can be pretty eloquent. But when I haven't researched my side, or if I haven't, researched the other side, if I don't know, that's when I freeze. So it's always really good to have really good information on both sides. So that way, if you need to do a counter argument, Again, remind yourself about fallacies and fallacious arguments. So if you are trying to do an opposing side, you're not doing the straw man where you're, weakening their their argument just so that you can attack that weak part versus the actual argument. Or again, ad hominem, where you're attacking the person rather than actually addressing the issue. So be mindful of those types of things as you're being a persuasive, speaker. And remember, an argument is a stance on an issue based on reasons. Okay, so you're not fighting with someone in this discussion. You're saying, this is my stance on this particular issue based on these reasons. And the reasons are, data, research, information that you know to be true and valid that you can bring to the table. Okay. More and more as you transfer on to your different degrees in your upper division classes, you're going to be expected to express your views and to be able to do so well. How will you do that? What kind of practice have you been putting in place in this class to get you there? And again, if you've been doing the work and, maybe you, in the beginning it was kind of rough because you're like, where are we? Like maybe you've never had to really use critical thinking skills because let's be honest, society doesn't really give us too much of an opportunity. A lot of it is pushing of buttons. So, at first, again, you were probably struggling at first on how to express your views and to critically think. And hopefully now with all the practice and the continuation of recognizing the words, the dialogue, how they apply, how you can see them, whether it's in media and advertising or just in TV shows, that sort of thing. Maybe as you're working on your debate assignment, you can see both sides. So that way you're able to make an argument for both, but pick the one, where you're like, look, this is the one I, stand by based on my values and my experience and the research that I have done, right? And who knows, maybe when you pick your debate topic, you might go, I was going to do this side, but it turns out I actually recognize that this might be the stance that I want to argue. So I know that was vague, but you get the gist, okay? Where are we at? Speaking eloquently on difficult subjects is a skill that needs to be practiced to be well done. You got to practice, practice, practice. That's just really how it is, which is why, I might say, hey, stand in front of a mirror and practice. Talk to your cats, talk to your puppy dogs, talk to your partners, your friends, record yourself. That's always a great way because then you can kind of see also maybe your facial tics, something that might stick out that kind of calls you out when you're nervous. Little things. It's all about practice. If you want to be good at it, you got to do more of it. It's not something you're going to get right away. That's why this is a hard class. Critical thinking is not easy. It takes practice. To be well spoken takes practice. It takes sometimes humility. Sometimes we have to do some things we're like, wow, that was a little ego boost, ego crushing, but that's okay. You learn from that. That's the goal here. It's okay to crash and burn and start again. Okay. So if you were to take a speech class, that is definitely going to address the speaking aspect more so than this particular class. But it's not, but while a speaking class is really good for standing up in front of a class, it might not give you the same tools that I'm giving you, right? So I'm giving you the tools so that if you do take a speech class, there you go. You can apply it as you go forward. All right, so sometimes it's not formal speech in front of a group or like a big report. Sometimes it's not like this big, huge thing. Sometimes when you're trying to, have a persuasive or even standing in front of an audience, any kind of like speech that you have to give, sometimes it is not necessarily a huge group. Sometimes it could be a small group too. Sometimes it could just be, even if it's only 8 students in a class, sometimes that's even more frightening than a whole group of people you don't even know versus those who kind of know you a little bit, more intimately. So sometimes even 3 people can be very intimidating. I think often of, as an instructor, anytime I've ever gone for any kind of interviews, it's a panel and there's a lot of people in front of me. And I have to be okay to speak to everyone eloquently, knowledgeable about my, the subject that I'm interviewing on. So what we're practicing here isn't just for a huge audience. Sometimes it's just a handful of people, which can be very intimidating, especially if it's for a job interview. And I imagine based on, some of the conversations we've had in this class, a lot of you will probably have interviews that are not just one-on-one, but a whole panel, and they're taking notes and they're looking at you. I'm telling you, it's unnerving, but if you do it enough, you kind of get used to it. So it's all about practice. Okay. Let's see here. Sometimes, I'm sorry, I'm trying to look at my notes. Sometimes speaking in public doesn't have anything to do with school. Okay, so while again this class we don't do that, there might be other classes where you have to stand up and give a report or give a particular persuasive, point on a topic of some degree, or maybe research you found on a history paper, whatever that might be. There is a lot of school there, but other times you might have times where you're speaking eloquently at like maybe your friend's wedding, maybe you're a best man or a best maid of honor, and you have to stand up there and be charming and cute. I've never been in that situation, so but maybe, who knows, maybe there's this time in which you might have to do that. Maybe you get an acceptance speech, even if it's again with a small group of people or maybe a large group. Again, not all this has to be academic. Oftentimes it's just in society as a whole. These are the things that we do. Funerals, there's often times where you go to either someone close to you or a friend, or even maybe someone you just kind of knew offhandedly, and you go and someone's like, would you like to speak? And they pull you up and you're like, emotionally driven situation. How do you compose under that? How do you stay composed? The more practice you have in having persuasive speaking and talking in front of people, the easier these things become. So I'm not saying it doesn't make me want to throw up every time. Hell, I'm a teacher and I stand in front of a class, and I've been doing this for so long. I've been teaching forever and I still get nervous. So just know, even with practice, even with multiple degrees, it's not easy. So do keep that in mind. I think of the fears in the world, there's public speaking and then death, right? People are more afraid of speaking in public than they are of dying. Like, I'd rather be dead than speak. Understandable, right? It's not easy. Yeah, can't fathom. Okay, anyway. What do you do if you're shy or you don't feel like you have any charisma? Practice, practice, practice. If you don't feel like you are going to be good at it, or you're just shy, or you've got anxiety issues like I do, practice and practice and practice. It's kind of like, it's going to sound a little, I don't know, maybe unique for some of you, but do you ever have like a favorite song that from top to bottom? You could probably, sing it upside down and backwards. Like, you just know the whole entire song. That's because you've been practicing. You love it. You like the sound of it. You like the way it rolls off your tongue. Like, that is how you know that. Well, think of a speech in that way. Practice it like you're practicing the lyrics of a song. All right. So when you practice something, whether it's the high of your voice, the low of your voice, the tone, the lyrical aspects of it, if you say it over and over again enough times, you can actually, it becomes like a song in your head, which should hopefully be able to be one of those things that when you do go to present in front of people, that practice will be so muscle memory, it'll be so automatic that it won't be as panicky when you have to do it. So have I been able to do that? I teach sometimes the same thing for years on end, and I still catch myself going, how? I do. I freeze when I'm in front of people. I don't know why I took teaching because I love teaching. I do love it. But anyway, just keep that in mind, that the more you practice, the better you will be at these things. So also make sure that your organization is clear and your content is strong, which makes it a lot easier. I've had students who, not in my English 11 class, like, my English composition class, who stood up in front of class to do research report, no paper, no notes, no anything behind them, and they just try and talk, and it just falls. You could tell they didn't practice, and if I were to ask questions, they just fall apart. And that's the problem, is there was no practice, there was no organization, there was no clear research. The content was flimsy at best and just opinionated. Opinions like asshole, everyone has them and they all stink, right? I have old man jokes. But unfortunately, and as we've learned in class, opinions don't have any backing for their statements, right? Like, if you have an argument versus opinion is going to be different, because your argument is the stance you take on an issue, and you're using reasons, versus just an opinion on something which doesn't have the backing, doesn't have the reasons for it. And there's that big difference. So think about that as you are to create your either an argument for something, and even again, your debate is going to need the reasons why either side chooses their opinion on either on the issue. Which side? What are they saying? What are the reasons that back that up? And again, if you're aware of the good parts of a speech, it doesn't matter if you're shy, because you'll go, okay, here's my intro. This is the next thing I have to do. And then I have this. And then, like, if you know all the parts, it all just comes a lot easier. Okay. All right. How many of you already taken a public speaking class? Or English 11. I don't know. Everyone's kind of, semester changes. You might not have had a public speaking class here at Butte. Maybe you had one when you were high school. Maybe you're in the debate team. So, maybe you're really good at this stuff. Or maybe you're like me and put it off to the last minute because you're like, oh, don't make me do it. And I don't want to do it. If you were in it and you thought you're, charismatic, did you feel, I thought I was charismatic until I got up in front of class and realized, nope. Or were you nervous and shy the whole time? Did the class help you if you're in it? And then what did you get out of that class? So just something to think about as you move forward if you haven't taken the class yet, or how you might apply that to what we're learning here. So a few things to learn about public speaking is ways to deal with speech anxiety. Again, these are just ways in which you can maybe apply it if it helps. Everybody's different, who knows? So breathing techniques is one of the first ones that you can use, where slow down, because you're going to notice majority of the time, and you've seen this too, when people go to speak and they get nervous, the first thing they start doing is speed talking, like they're in an auction, just going off. You just got to breathe. And it's okay. Here's the thing. Also, sometimes if you're nervous and you tell your audience that you're nervous, then it takes the relief off, right? It's weird. Like, okay, look guys, I'm nervous. And then everyone's like, oh, okay. So it almost like your audience will ease and create like an air of sympathy, because they're like, okay, let's not give much more to this person up there who's already nervous. So you breathe, okay? Take your time on that. Sometimes it helps if you're laughing and telling jokes to kind of like shake it off a little bit. Maybe not before in the speech itself. Sometimes in the intro to grab a hook, people will tell a joke. That doesn't always work. Not everybody's a comedian, and sometimes jokes just flat out don't land well and makes the situation much worse. So be careful about jokes. I would say maybe, start in the, before you do your speech, kind of do some jokes, laugh, stretch it out, get it out, kind of like ease the tension a little bit. I am the worst when shit hits the fan, excuse my language. When it gets wrong, when it gets wild and weird, that's when I start cracking jokes. I don't know what that is. It's like a trauma comedian. Like for some reason, like things go wrong, I make a joke. I don't know. I think it's just my body's way of handling things. So anyway, again, practice, practice, practice. Do it in front of a mirror. Do it in front of friends. Record yourself. Anything that can, so you can look back and go, okay, that's what I do. I got to remember to stop doing that particular tick, whatever that might be. I have a friend who they have a beard and they're always like rubbing their beard, or they stomp their foot. They stomp their foot and they rub their beard, and it's very distracting as an audience member. So just, maybe recording yourself to see what you do. But record yourself not looking at the screen, turn it around so you can't see yourself, and then watch it later. That's a little bit more helpful. Okay, again, don't try and memorize the whole speech. Maybe instead just the intro and the closing, so that way when you first start, you can kind of get yourself going, and then you'll have your notes available. Make your notes big, make them, bullet points, make it short, sweet, and simple. Don't read from your notes, but at least have them with you. Again, you don't have to try and memorize the whole thing. If you have a great memory, God bless you. Like, I get 2 sentences in and I'm like, every student who's ever had me, I have my notes with me. And sometimes even here, I have to make sure I follow my notes, because that's just how my brain works. Students have continuously told me I have ADD. I haven't been tested, so I don't know, but you're probably going, yeah. Okay, again, don't try and memorize. Just get your intro and your closing as well versed as you can, and hopefully that'll lean you in. Make sure you got your bullet points as you go through. Give yourself a positive pep talk every time a negative self-talk enters your head. This is something I need to learn to do. When your urge is like, oh, I'm so stupid, like, no, stop. You are not stupid. You have not done this before, or you're shy, or this is just not your strong suit. That's okay, because it's all in practice. So, be very kind to yourself. What we're talking here, again, people would choose death before they choose public speaking. So give yourself some grace when it comes to doing things that are hard, failing at things. Like it happens. Again, you can't just do a thing and be good at it right away. That would be shocking. It's rare that ever happens. You still want to keep practicing so you can keep getting better, but just know that this is not easy. Give yourself some grace. If you feel like you've given yourself some negative self-talk, pause, breathe, and go, look, it's okay. You're still trying to do this. Like, keep going, keep practicing. Just, oops, that's okay. We're going to try it again, okay? Fake it. Most people have no idea how nervous you are, so just act as if you're confident. I know when I said, hey guys, I'm nervous, you can do one of two ways. You could say that to ease the tension, or you can also fake it and claim you have confidence. Either one works, to be honest with you. Someone's going to probably argue me about the first statement about, telling your audience you're nervous. But that's okay too, right? Like, nobody's perfect. Nobody is perfect. And, if you are feeling that way, it's okay if you let your audience know. And that's what I'm going to say. And that's where I'm going to stand. But you can also fake it with confidence. You can also act as if you are confident. And sometimes when you're like, guys, I'm nervous, then all of a sudden you get this air of confidence. You're like, just kidding, I'm fine, Practice, practice, practice. That's going to really help you and as best you can. Don't try to make your voice, or speaking style different than usual. Don't all of a sudden start with some random accent or, do a thing that you've never done before. Because what happens is when you try and change that, acting's different. It does sometimes come off as, what's the word? Not inconsistent, disingenuous, right? So just kind of be mindful. It helps to use a conversational style as if you're talking with friends. It works best with audiences, but again, it depends on your audience. It depends on the topic, depends on how that works. Sometimes at the debate, you might have to have a different demeanor versus being conversational and leaning on the podium. You're like, so let me tell you, okay? Always slow down because most nervous people go too fast. Breathe. Take a minute. If you find yourself speeding up, it's okay to pause and go, and then get to it, okay? Again, it's hard because this is as if we are not professionals. We are not standing on stages right now. Some of you might have already gotten to that level, but majority of us are scared shitless standing in front of a classroom. So what I'm giving you here are just little tidbits to kind of get through maybe a rough speech, right? Just slow down, take a breath, and it's okay to pause. Sometimes your audience might be like, oh, thank God they were just talking too fast. Like they might appreciate you pausing for them to kind of catch up with you, and then you can go again, okay? Again, if you're using note cards, don't stare at them. And oftentimes when I've had students who go to present in class, they'll say something, oh, can I use my phone? The problem with that, and I don't have a phone in front of me, pretend this is a phone and I'm just talking to my phone like this. You're not feeling like this person giving this speech is giving attention to their audience at all, as if they even care to the audience. They're just reading. So I would not use your phone. I would actually, and this is the other part, handwriting actually does a cognitive it's like a hand-eye coordination. It actually helps you to remember. It actually helps you to learn. So write on note cards, and at best you might not even remember, but make sure it's big, because if you're like me, all of a sudden you're like, can't see, what was I doing? You don't want to be looking at your card like this. You want to be able to just like a quick glance, because card 1, first topic, okay, fold it over, drop it, get rid of it, do something with it. Card 2, I'd be mindful as you're switching them to be careful you don't kind of mix them all up. If you need to like put one in a pocket or if you have to drop it. Something that's going to keep you from getting too disorganized as you're doing that. I know dropping a note card, it's probably going to be distracting for your audience, so keep that in mind. So just be mindful as you're up there fidgeting and you're doing stuff with note cards. I know this is not ideal, but I want you to also trust that we're still learning, we're still practicing, we're doing what we can, we're trying to think, what's the next thing, what's going to help me as I get through this, okay? Because it's hard, and I know that, especially since COVID. Most students are just getting used to interacting with human beings again, right? Like even I'm still like, oh, there's people, I don't like it. I mean, I've always kind of been that way, but in the sense of, you know, when I feel I'm being judged, it's very anxiety inducing. So when you're standing up there, we're just trying to get through. So again, note cards, however, you got to be able to look at them, but not stare at them and read them. Okay. Bullet points help. And the reason why is if you do too much on there, you're going to catch yourself reading the whole thing. So do a bullet point and practice, practice, practice. So when you see the bullet point, that word should remind you of what you want to cover. Okay. Except that you're going to be nervous and, you know, use that energy to add to where you're at, you know, like you might be nervous and you're just like, oh, maybe that extra energy is going to be good for you. Maybe what helps you is a certain level of walking the crowd. As a teacher, I like to walk up and down the aisles. And I do that mostly because, you know, sometimes people in the back, maybe they need that, you know, they need someone to be next to them, kind of wakes them up a little bit. And it keeps people kind of awake. They got to turn around, maybe look at you. I don't know how that would work for you in your situation, but think of it about that. Like instead of standing behind the podium, maybe it helps to get that nervous energy out by walking. Okay. I'll have students, like I have a clicker, and if they have a PowerPoint, what they can do is they can click through as they're walking around versus standing there and looking up at the, you know, at the PowerPoint. Again, you're going to be nervous. Add that energy to your speech. Tell the audience that you're nervous, and they're going to root for you. So again, you can fake it, and you can fake the confidence, but sometimes we can't, and we're shaking and are sweating. Oh my God, stress sweat is the worst. Oh, I get you. So if that's the case, just like trust the fact that it's not going to be easy, and tell your audience, hey, look, I'm nervous, so bear with me as I go through this. And then all of a sudden you kind of see people's faces lighten a little bit, you know, and then all of a sudden you find yourself, while you didn't realize you had the confidence, it gives you something. So yeah, fake it if you need to, but also admit when you're struggling. Okay. Choose allies in the audience to focus on. Sometimes I notice, and I don't know if it's because of whatever audience member I am, but I get excited. I'm listening intently, I'm nodding, and I find that oftentimes the person speaking will look at me and they just like hone in because they see that I'm in, you know, I'm paying attention and I'm nodding. As a note, I'm sure many of you have seen this meme, but if you are a student who's listening and nodding, oh, thank you. As a teacher, I'm like, all right, you're getting it. We're here. We're together. So that's a really good audience member way to be. But as you're standing up there and you're giving your speech and you see someone who's nodding and who's into it, that's the person to hone in on, you know, and not that you mean to talk to that particular person or those people, but it helps because they're your allies and they're the ones who are there to be like, keep going. We got you. We appreciate you, versus those who are annoyed or rolling their eyes or on their phone. You're not on my phone in my class when students are giving speeches. So, but anyway, so, and sometimes that happens, right? You're up there and you see some audience members who just seem out of it. Then maybe that's just not the audience member you need to talk to. Talk to the ones who are in it with you. Okay, your sympathetic audience. We'll talk about that in a minute. Let's see here. Not actually looking at the audience members, but instead between them or over their heads. It kind of depends. If I have students in front of me, or if I have anyone in front of me, I can look at them, and if I look right above their heads or right in between them and the next person, I can usually get away with it, even though they're up front, or even in the back, you know. I hope my eyes don't roll in the back of my head when I do this, as I'm trying to blur a little bit of the scene around me. And it just kind of helps me like calm down. So that way I'll be honest, I didn't used to have contacts. I had very bad vision. And the thing that was more traumatizing than actually being able to see was I got to see the whites of people's eyes, and that scared me because I was so used to being not seeing people's eyes. So eye contact is very intimidating for me. So sometimes when you're speaking and you lock eyes with someone, it might throw you off. So if you need to, again, look at them, but not like far away as if you're not paying attention. Try and like look above their heads or between them, and in spaces where it kind of looks like you're looking at them, but you're not making such rigid eye contact that it like throws you off. Okay. Hopefully this is helping you. These are little tricks of the trade that have also helped me. If you need, and I don't usually suggest this, you can hide behind a podium. You can. It's still important to be, stand tall and act confident if you're going to be behind it. And sometimes that helps because you're like, okay, I just need something to kind of hold on to, or, you're able to speak a little bit better because you're not so focused on the way in which you're moving. So yes, you can hide behind a podium. It helps if you move around only because it's great for your audience. It keeps them engaged versus hearing your voice but not seeing movement. And sometimes you might see your audience kind of drone off. How do I know? I've been teaching a long time. You probably have already fallen asleep 30 minutes in. So I get it. It happens. But yeah, if you're body conscious or, it's too much otherwise, it's okay. Oftentimes you might stand behind, the computer screen so you can have your PowerPoint up front. Understandable. Sometimes we just got to get through what we got to get through. Totally understandable. Okay. Again, use visual aids to kind of help pull all the eyes off of you and onto something else. Plus, what's really great about visual aids is it keeps the audience engaged. You can also show your data, your research, your main points, and what's kind of cool is when you do that, instead of having your note cards, you threw it up there. So instead of having to look down at your note cards as you're talking to your audience, you might be able to go, and then in my second point, you see your point, and then you can talk to that, right? So that's usually like oftentimes the reason why I do PowerPoints and for students who are giving presentations is that they have something to look at, something to work with, and a distraction from them, but it also keeps them organized. So it's for you. That's what my goal is, to help you as you move through some really uncomfortable things, which is speaking. So anyway, visual aids are going to be really helpful. Also, you kind of have to dim the lights when it comes to PowerPoint sometimes, which also takes the heaviness of the light on you. So think about that as you do some of your presentations. If it's something that is, available and part of the request of either your teacher or the situation which you're in, okay? Let's see. Our book says if you talk about something you care about, it makes it a lot easier. That's why with this debate, usually done in person, when you pick a topic that you're passionate about on a side that you really want to stand for, it makes it a lot easier. So think about that when it comes to speech. This way with funerals, you'd be really surprised that people who would normally not be able to speak, especially in such a highly emotional situation, they might be very passionate about the person who's there and are able to speak very eloquently and very beautifully about the person because of their attachment and experience with this person and the passion, right? 3 parts of a good speech are content, organization, and delivery. Okay, so our content is all the stuff I was just talking about, all the research, all the organization, the content for sure, the content, the data, the research, that information, followed by the organization. You have your intro, you have your body with your main points, and then you have your conclusion. These are very important because also, if you keep it organized, it becomes a very good speech because you go from one point that leads to the next, which are all validating your main point to get to your conclusion. All right, something to think about there. And then when you have good content and good organization, the delivery comes naturally, right? When you've done all the practicing, have you done all the research, because of all the prep work of getting that good content and how you've organized it, then you can be, it's easier for you to deliver the information. All right. And then, so what do you need to have good content? You need good sources, always good sources. One thing to be mindful of, and I'm sure you see this all the time on social media, when you pull biased sources, people say Fox or CNN, right? If you pull these biased sources, people are automatically going to attack those sources. So what you really want to do is be mindful of the reliable type of resources that you get. I guess anybody could argue that media is skewed. AP is a really good one, and Reuters. Those are really good. Actual research from the source that's peer reviewed, because you have multiple people who validated those, the data that has come up. So reliable and appropriate research is key to good content. Key to good content. We don't want opinions. We don't want this emotionally driven, things coming at us. We want to see, hey, this literally proves what I'm trying to say. Like, you can't deny this particular data. That's what you're looking for in good content. You have probably seen me go through the papers and go, can't accept this. Sorry, this is not the research we're looking for. That doesn't validate what you're trying to say. This is what I'm looking for, right? And I pushed for that. And the reason why I needed to push for that is because I wanted you to go, oh shoot, okay, that's what you mean. Not just some random source, but something that validates my point. That is a good source. I wasn't aggressive about it, but I was probably leaning you more towards data and statistic-based research than I was the opinion of somebody's blog on a thing, or someone else's analytical review of a thing, or whatever. My goal here was for you to find data that validated your point. See what I was trying to do there? I'm always trying to help you here. Okay, quotes and paraphrases create great content. I push more for quotes. Direct quotes are a little bit more helpful. You can paraphrase. The problem is I don't put a lot of practice into paraphrasing, which is something that honestly, like, and even in my many years of, college and degrees, paraphrasing wasn't something that was really like into my brain. It was one of those, like, because paraphrasing is really hard. Paraphrasing isn't just reiterating what somebody said and changing a couple words. It's taking a lot of information and being able to put it into something small. This is why oftentimes it's a lot easier to make a simple, direct quote that said the thing within context versus trying to paraphrase that same sentence. Does that make sense? Sometimes paraphrasing a sentence almost makes it worse, and then might actually skew what the person really meant to say. So direct quotes is always usually your first initial best bet. Paraphrasing helps if you've got a lot of information and you're just trying to say exactly what this whole paragraph said in a very succinct way. Okay, it's hard. Even in my English too, I don't push very hard for it, but I probably should. Anyway, paraphrasing is not easy. Just keep that in mind. It helps too when you go to use a quote. You've heard me say signal phrases. What I'm asking you is presenting the quote. I want you to introduce what's coming to us. Like, where's this quote coming from? Why is this particular quote, important? Who's saying it? It helps to have clear spoken signal phrases that is introducing the information that you're going to give us, whether it's the quote or the paraphrase, which is really important for your audience to trust the content that you're giving us. Remember, appeal to authority while it is fallacious, depending on the authority. You also want to give us the authority figure to let us know, this is why we should listen, because this person is the doctor of blah, blah, and they know all this information on this topic. So that's the difference in using appeal to authority fallaciously versus actually giving the authority to tell us, we trust this particular person because their degree is literally in researching this. That's how we know. All right. Another thing that's really good for good content is, again, really good examples. Remember how in vocabulary, give me an example. This is practice. The goal you should always be leaning towards whenever you're trying to explain something is an example of what you're trying to say. It creates a very clear ground for your audience, so they always know, okay, thank you for that example. Now I know what you're saying. I take that and I'm willing to listen to the rest of what you're saying because I also understand. Also, you want to support your main points with data, with statistics, with research, with information that's valid, that you could say, that is a factual statement, that is true data, I see it there. All right, I'm going to keep listening to you because I see you're validating your points. All right. Also include the reasons, and the reasons What are we looking for? The reasons, again, are going to be based on this research from what we've experienced. The reasons need to validate your stance on an issue. Okay. And then antidotes, oftentimes like experiential stories or things that you could use to help validate your points. It includes the examples, but again, anecdotes of stories or things that could say, and that's why I make a stance on this particular issue. Okay. And last but not least, a very clear point. In your intro, you're going to bring us, hey, this is what I'm trying to explain to you. Here's all the reasons and the data and the information are, my examples, my support, my reasons, my antidotes, which brings me then to this conclusion of this is how I came to this point is because of all this information. Okay. That's your content. Now when we talk about organization, again, you have your beginning, your middle, and your end. And your beginning is your intro, and your intro's goal is to get your audience to come sit down and listen to what you have to say. It can catch the attention, whether it's a statistic, whether it is an antidote, whether it's a question or something that your audience, it's like, oh, I'm sorry, what was that? And you catch them going, oh, tell me a little bit more. They're curious. Develop the curiosity of your audience in some way. What does that look like, right? It depends on your topic. It depends on who your audience is. You might have... what do you call it? A hostile audience who's already not ready to listen to you. They already don't want to hear what you have to say. Start your introduction with something that might be relatable to them, even if it's a little, how do I say this? They might not initially want to hear what you want to say on this particular topic. But if you come to them and say, let me explain why this is important for you, they might be more willing to listen. Talk to your audience. Like if you want them to hear you, you kind of need to hear them too. So come to them with a, hey, this is why it's important to you. Come listen to me. Let me explain this to you, right? Just kind of, I don't know if reeling them in is the right way to do it, but you want to be sympathetic to an audience in order for the audience to be sympathetic to you. Okay. So just think about that as you begin your intro. How is your intro going to take your audience and go, let's come together and think about how we can address this particular issue. Okay. It's wild. I'm really surprised more politicians don't come at it in that way of, let me show you why this is important for all of us versus us against them. We're in a weird space right now when it comes to all this stuff. But think about that. If you are going to create an argument for a stance, come to your audience sympathetic to what their plight is first, and then explain why you recognize that what you want to say is important for them and their success and their health and their happiness, or whatever the statement might be. Okay, that's your intro. In that intro, while you've gotten your audience, you kind of did your little thing, you now want to kind of preview a little bit of what you're about to talk about. Again, sometimes you have to be a little delicate on this, because if you're going to have contrary views to what your audience, which might possibly be hostile to, you want to kind of set them up for what's to come and why it's important to them. Why is this mattering? Like, okay, I see you might not agree with this, but let's talk it through. Let me give you some points on what I'm seeing and how we can connect these things. That's how you're doing. This is persuasion, y'all. We're trying to really get people to hear us. Instead of talking at people, we want to talk with people. Even though they're an audience member, how can we get them engaged? All right, so again, preview again what you're about to talk about after you bring them in, and then transition into each point you want to make. It doesn't have to be aggressive. It can be straight to the point, but always lead with something that's going to help us understand one point to the next point to the next. Whether, you've got your intro where you're sympathetic to your audience, you're bringing them in, and then you're like, okay, but this is the topic we're going to talk about. And then each point you make leads into the next, which draws us to the conclusion. Okay. You might kind of ease them into each topic, and then lean a little bit more towards, how you are trying to persuade them in some way, with research, with data, again, with sympathetic antidotes in which you're like, and look, I get where you're coming from. In fact, this is a situation that happened once. But what happened then is, and then you throw in some data, some research that kind of leans them a little bit more. So you're slowly trying to get your audience to come with you to this conclusion. And again, you're using your data, you're using your antidotes, your examples, again, sympathetic to their plight, what they're struggling with. Let me help you understand that I get it, but I also see a solution, and this is what it could be. Okay. And then again, as you hooked them, you said, okay, so we're going to talk about, let's kind of ease into it. And you kind of help them mull it over, and you bring them to this conclusion and say, and this is why on this particular issue, it is so important that we do this thing, because when we look at this, all the way through all these different, reasons, and with you, what you're dealing with, this is why it's important that we do this. Okay. I know that's very vague, but you can imagine any single topic in the world that you would be able to do that to. And that's the goal of persuasive talking. It's not just to trick someone into believing something. It's to show them why it's important with passion and kindness. And you'd be surprised at how when someone feels like they're being heard, even if it's from an opposition, it takes the walls down and you can breathe a little easier and you can go, oh, you actually do hear me. I see now. And that's the thing. We're not hearing and seeing each other. And I think that's the reason why no one's being really, truly persuaded unless they're the sympathetic audience. Like, I already believed with what you were going to say. My values align with yours. Like, of course, everything you say, you're feeding my beast. Versus someone who has an opposing view and you're like, don't try and change my values. Don't try and change my opinion. Right? You're already against what someone might have to say. But if they come to you and go, oh, I absolutely get it. You go, well, how do you get it? And they kind of walk you through it and you're like, oh. So both sides can kind of be right. Okay. Not that there's a right or wrong, but yeah, I can see now your point too. That's our goal. We want to see all the sides. Okay. Which is why in your debate project, you do both sides so that you can see how you might be able to persuade one side over the other. See what I did there? All right. To give a strong delivery, this is that other part, to give the delivery itself is all the key parts that, we just talked about. It's hard. You want good body language. Again, sometimes people like to stand behind the podium because for them it's like, okay, all I have to do is stand here and give my speech. But if you kind of standing up a little bit, just standing up, there's literal, in that video that I show about expectations, there is a person who you can see the silhouette of them walking. And as they walk confidently and then they kind of go down. When they go down, their shoulders are down, their head's down, right? There's just this, like, the question mark of the body. And the question mark of the body is literally a question mark of, like, you just feel it. You can feel the sadness versus the exclamation point of the body when you're standing straight up. For some reason, and it's that body language, we can read it. That standing up straight, we instantly see that and go, oh, okay, they seem to know what they're talking about. All you got to do is stand up straight. People will, like, instantly think of you as a confident person. Guaranteed, walk down the street, watch how people walk. The second you see someone standing up straight, you almost don't even know how to take it because they're standing up so erect. You're just like, wow, okay. You don't know, do I like this person? They almost have too much confidence versus someone who's like slinking down in, sad pants, and you look at them and you're like, oh, like you can almost feel the sadness. Body language matters, okay? With body language, that includes eye contact, right? And again, even if you can't look someone directly in the eye, which I highly suggest doing if you ever sit face to face and talk to someone, try and create more eye contact. It's very impactful. It's intimidating at first, but it creates a connection that is unlike anything you'll ever experience in your life. Eye contact. If you can't do it in person when you're standing up in front of people because you're like me and you get distracted, it might be ADD, I don't know. Anyway, if that's the case, look behind the cracks, but pretend in some way that you're trying to give eye contact. Don't look off and beyond. And I'm sure half the time, in my videos, I'm looking down, and that must be very distracting to you. I know, I'm aware of it. I'm about 48 minutes in. I don't want to go back and redo a video because I looked down at my thing. But I get that eye contact is key. So when you're having, with your body language and you're giving your speech, Don't just like look off and guess or stare at your paper. Try and find a way to look at your audience. And this is why moving helps, because moving, you could do things that aren't as obvious as if you're standing there straight. Again, if you're moving around a classroom, I'm gonna give you a little trick of what I do. I got my clicker, but as I walk around the classroom, I can turn around and see the PowerPoint. I walk to the end, and as I'm walking back, I'm looking at the PowerPoint, okay? But I walk with, as an exclamation point so that I'm pretending that, I'm not looking at it, I'm just talking. And because I've memorized majority of the things I have conversations about, it's a little easier. It's a little bit more practiced. Just think of that. Try not to be too distracting. You would have noticed in my last video, I messed with my hair a lot. Did you notice I was messing with my hair? It was probably distracting, wasn't it? Because when I mess with my hair, my voice got quiet. You can kind of see these little things where you're like, just pay attention. Exactly. That's the point. Fidgeting with my hair. Maybe I was messing with my clothes. If I mess with my clothes, or I'm itching my arms. Did you see that too? That kind of behavior is distracting. And so you want to be mindful of that, which is why I would suggest take your camera, record yourself, but not so you can see it, but so that you can look at it after. Does that make sense? So turn it around so you're not looking at the screen, and then see what kind of unintended, unconscious behaviors you have that might show up as you're giving your speech, okay? Good vocal technique, volume, and don't use like or I know, they are so hard. I would highly suggest, if you have an opportunity to, if you're recording it or doing it in front of a friend, have your friend mark every time you say or like. And it's funny, we give certain different pauses in between. I use the word right. I get it. I know that I do it. It is a nervous tick. Don't know how to stop it, but I'm aware of it. I try and be more mindful of it. And again, and like, it's our natural urge to pause and think, what's another way of doing that, right? There you go, see? Think of different ways that you can not use like or not use It's all about practice, so think about that. Also, tone, expression, and pacing. Is your tone uplifting? Is your tone dramatic? Is it really getting to the point? Is it aggressive? Is it kind? Is it sympathetic to your audience to get them to come with you? Or is it, let me tell you what you need to hear? What is the need in this, presentation you'll be doing, or the speech? What is it that you do there? And to be honest, pacing is incredible. Slow down and pause. And again, I have the habit too of blah, 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 really fast, even in, these videos. But what happens when I pause? Your first instinct is to think about there's a pause. You're like, oh, did she ask a question? You capture, your audience's attention when you do that sort of pacing. Something to think about, okay? All right, so that's the way you're going to do your delivery. So hopefully I gave you all these little techniques that are going to help you as you go through your speech. The last thing you need to really understand is your audience. And I've mentioned this a couple different times throughout the lecture already. But you're going to have 3 different types of audience members. You're going to have your sympathetic audience, and it's like you're already talking to your friends. You're all on the same topic. You're having a good time. They're laughing. You're laughing. It's fantastic. Sympathetic audiences are the best audiences. You're having a great time. They feed you. You're having fun. I love that. It's my favorite as a teacher because I'm like, yes, we're all in it together. Let's learn. Woohoo! I love it. It feeds me. We have a good time. But there's times when I'm standing here, as a teacher, and I have a hostile audience. Nobody wants to be in the class. It's, I don't know what would be the reason. Maybe they're all tired. Maybe they just don't like me. Maybe they just don't like English. They don't want to listen to anything I have to say. It's Daniel in the lion's den. It's me and a whole bunch of people who don't want to be there and don't want to hear it. I'll be honest, that's actually really rare in my classes. But every now and then you still get a couple audience members who are hostile, like don't want to be there. They'd rather be on the phone. That's just how it is. They're unsympathetic. They don't want to hear it. They just want to just not even be there. I don't know why they're there anyway, but that's just the way it is, right? You're going to have some hostile audience members. I'll talk about that one in a little bit second. To be honest with you, hostile audiences are really hard to sway. They don't want to be there. They already have their mindset. I could come at them with as many different persuasive ways. I could offer extra credit. I could do anything I needed to do to try and get them to either like my topics or class or whatever more. It's not going to work as a hostile audience member. They don't want to be there. And it's very unlikely that I would be able to sway them in some way to all of a sudden like English, right? Or English class or writing or whatever the case may be. That's just how it is. So keep that in mind if you do have a hostile audience. But one good thing is there's the neutral audience. They don't know what they want. And you now have the opportunity to tell them what they should do. Maybe not in that sense, but this is a great opportunity for persuasive speaking where you can really go like, you don't know what you want? I could tell you what I know, and here's my intro, and here's my data and my research, and this is what I came to as a conclusion, and, you know, hopefully it'll read well with your audience. So, again, which of these types is most important to speak well in front of? The neutral audience. Always the neutral audience, because they don't know what they want. They don't care. They're neutral. They're here. They're like, I don't know. Tell me what you got to, tell me what you got to say. These are the people where you want to be, well-versed, you want to be clear, you want to have a great introduction, you really want to show all your data, and you want to show them why your conclusion matters, like, hey, this is why. And you want to be eloquent, you want to be, you want to stand up like a exclamation point, you want to really be able to give them something that they can take home and go, I did not expect that. I didn't even know what to expect, but thank you for all this information. They go home and they do something with it. That's the most important audience, and why it's really important that, you don't always know who your audience members are. You can usually see a hostile audience, like you can feel it. You can feel it's sympathetic, and neutral, it's kind of nice because they come in and they're like, tell me what I need to know, right? What's the thing you're trying to teach me? Okay. You're the one who helps them decide when it comes to, points on an issue, right? Your stance. So neutral audience is pretty much that. So therefore, it's important that you are fair and balanced. Always be fair and balanced. Even if you really want to scream from the rooftops this particular, like, it has to be this way. Show both sides. Show your understanding of how one person might, have an opinion here and here, but you want to show both sides and why maybe this side would be the one, choice, like why you feel this would be the better choice. Okay. Present yourself as reasonable and well-informed. If you come at this obviously biased, obviously aggressive, obviously guessing or opinionated, your audience is going to be kind of annoyed. They're going to be like, but tell me why. Give me the research. Give me the data. That's what your audience is going to want from you. Always have that. Always have your backup main points. That's going to help you. Open with a concession to show that you understand their point of view. Again, I know I tried to kind of say maybe you can work with the hostile audience. Probably not, but with a neutral audience, it also helps to be sympathetic to maybe their potential plight, which helps them go, oh, they understand me. I'm willing to listen. Okay. Sympathetic audiences, you don't have to win over. Sympathetic audiences, you already got them. But the neutral audience, they want to see where you're coming from on a healthy level, not aggressive, not passive, but hey, here's the information, and this is why I feel the way I feel. Maybe you might want to consider that too. Okay. Again, sympathetic, they already agree with you. You don't have to present, the other side in a sympathetic audience, which is the frustrating part. I think right now we see in politics often you'll have a politician standing at a podium and everyone loves them and it's this huge thing, and they don't have to persuade the audience in any way. They don't have to prove themselves. They already have, their groups that are following them. So, they don't have to show the other side. That's the problem. It seems nowadays that politicians don't have to show the other side the points, right? They don't seem to want to show, the balance or the reason why. Instead, it just is like, hey, look, you like me? That's good enough. Let's go forward. So that's just kind of how it is. Okay. And then the hostile audiences, again, I guess politician's my best example here. You have a politician and they're trying to talk to an audience that already doesn't like them, an audience that already doesn't believe in their policies, an audience that, doesn't matter whether or not they voted, they just might not like the person. So no matter what they say, they're probably not going to get through to them. So, anywho, that's just how that goes. Okay, what is a concession? A concession is conceding that there is some merit, however small, to an opponent's argument, and admitting that. Be like, you know what, yeah, to be honest with you, and this is what you would do in your debate, I can see where you're coming from that point. I get it. I see that, you know, even if it's a little small, you're willing to see it and admit it, but then back up your point on this side. So a concession helps you get a hostile audience to listen. So you got an audience, they don't want to hear you. That's when, again, you're like sympathetic. Look, I see what you're going through. I get it. I totally agree with you on this particular thing. But let me show you this. And they kind of lean them back over. It shows that you're fair. It shows that you're not just saying, I'm against you, you got to listen to me. Instead, it's saying, I get your plight. I totally understand. I feel you. But let me help you also see both sides and see if you can come to a point on, you know, either one. All right. But you never will end your speech on a concession. Completely unravels the whole point of your argument. You can bring a concession in to kind of, again, show your sympathy towards someone's situation, but you don't end your conclusion on that, because then what was the point? You always want to end strong. Hey, look, I understand, but let me tell you this. And you give those main points, that final, this is why you should listen to me despite that. Okay? Let's see here. If you've made a concession, you have to follow it with you want to refute it, right? You always want to refute the concession, but where you still come back to where you're right. You don't want to just end on the, oh, well, you know, you might be right on this. And then you don't even follow up with why. It's still not quite, you know, the point you're trying to make. Okay. In the lecture notes, if you finish under the concession, it's going to give you a practice of how you can do concessions and refuting each other. Again, I don't really have a way of doing this. I guess we could do it through like a discussion, but it's a lot easier when you're in person. So we don't do that in class, so you don't have to get too panicky over that. Take a look at the movie clips that I include for Henry V and Miracle, and how both speakers make concessions and refutations. How do I say it? They refute it. I have the word there, but I can't seem to say it. This happens all the time when I do these. Sorry. Okay, so you would do a concession and then you refute it. Okay, so in the Miracle, the coach has a sympathetic, neutral, or does he have a sympathetic, neutral, or hostile audience? All right, and it's more complicated because they don't want to die, but I'm sorry, not that one. Students have to make a case for any of these. So if you were to say, is it sympathetic, neutral, or hostile in the Miracle video, which one would it be, and how would you know that? Now for Henry V, sorry if I confused you for a second there. Henry V is the king. Does he have a sympathetic, a neutral, or a hostile audience? What does it show in this video? And again, it's a lot more complicated because the soldiers don't want to die, but they are very loyal subjects. Okay. Personally, I would say that it's neutral because they're not quite convinced. Henry V has to convince them to do the thing. Okay, so it'd probably be more neutral. There's some talking points here for Henry V for the clip for you to take a look at. Take a look at how it was in 16 years ago in France, but it's still a very famous battle because of how it turned out. Let's see here. Shakespeare wrote this play, which would have been regarded by the English about the same way we regard a movie like The Patriot, about the American Revolution. Anyway, so take a look at that. And then, let's see, the type of audience that will affect the organization of your speech. Okay. Last but not least, I know we're almost done. In good persuasive speeches or in writing, you want to make sure that you have ethos, logos, and pathos. I know a lot of you probably already heard this in many of your other classes. We'll touch on it super lightly, but just to kind of help you out. So ethos, I'm trying to think of how we would use the word ethos here. I guess you could say ethos would be maybe your own background and your experience here. You could say that maybe I was, maybe I was, teaching someone for a long time, and then, one of these students that I was teaching says that he's a dungeon master in Dungeon and Dragons, and it's like, because he says that, it established a certain authority for me. So I'm like, oh, okay. Because of that, now he's created this ethos that I kind of want to listen to him because of that. You can also admit we don't have experience, but that you can make up for it in other ways. Again, you're establishing your authority here. You could be doing good research, interviewing people, having all this background. While you personally might be wholly, an expert, you have the expert statements behind you. And what is the effect on a hostile audience of someone who shows up and obviously hasn't practiced, who looks sloppy, inappropriately dressed, and mumbles? This affirms their view. So again, like students who've come up, they're not prepared. They don't know what they're, they have no organization. It just, so when I'm asking questions, they see it's a hostile audience and they usually implode on themselves because they're not ready. They haven't established the authority of the research and, all their information. There's no ethos within their work. Pathos, it's how you want the audience to feel. So you think of pathos as, what is that? I don't want to say pathetic. That's not the word. It's pathological, like the feelings. The feelings. There's a word I was going to use. I got distracted because my phone just beeped. So pathos is the way you want your audience to feel, right? The pathology. Pathology, is that the right word? Just the emotions. Okay. So you have to make the feelings obvious within your essay, right? How do you make them feel? And you have to almost get them to identify it within the speech and the essay. All right. So again, pathos is how you feel. Ethos is establishing authority. Okay. And then logos, again, that's the logic, that's the organization. It's the credibility that you put within the work, not just establishing a certain authority, but now you're putting in the logic. You're putting in, what do you call it? Credible content, right? Content that people can say, okay, you're not biased. You are literally pulling actual research. You're showing both sides. You're being very logical here, right? Logos, logical. Because of that, you create a sense of like, okay, all right, I think I could believe you. All right. So the intro, guys, we're about an hour and 6 minutes in. I apologize. The intro establishes interest, trust, tone in the relationship, okay? And how do you do this? Remember the 4 types of an argument. Your thesis will make one of these cases, so make sure you state it clearly after your introduction. You introduce it, and then you say, this is what we're going to talk about, and then you get into the points, okay? Don't use fallacies. Be very clear with your transitions. Ease us into each one. That's logos. And then end with a clincher, right? What's that clincher? What's that thing, that last remark that's going to say, and this is why, okay? And for these reasons, and because dogs are man's and women's best friends, please spay and neuter your pets, okay? It's the best way we can show the way we love them, right? What's that thing that gets them right to the heart, makes them go, oh, yes. What's that last point? Okay, and then we have flow charts. I'll see if I can find some good ones in here. You can look at Monroe's motivational speech sequence as well. Make sure you understand attention, need, satisfaction, visualization, and action. Okay, so anyway, that is all we have for chapter 10. I'm sorry the last few bits are short. If we're an hour and 7 minutes in, we don't need to go much further. I'm tired, you're tired, okay? All right, so anyway, you're good to go. Please message me if you have questions. I'll look more at Monroe's motivated sequence and decide whether or not I want to add that into one of our final responses, because I didn't cover it very well, so I probably won't. Anyway, that being the case, keep up the great work. We're almost done. Make sure you're utilizing all those pieces in your persuasive debate, okay? All right, we're done. Thank you. Bye.